Welcome back. Today I'm going to talk about the top 5 lures that I use to catch more bass. Now before I get going, I just want to say thank you for watching our videos, and don't forget to subscribe and click that little bell so you can see all of our future videos coming up. It lets you know. And don't forget to comment about any questions you have or anything that you liked about the video or disliked about the video. Thanks again for watching, and let's get this going. So my number one go-to to catch more bass, especially in situations where the bass are a little more finicky, is definitely going to be a finesse setup. It is going to be a Senko. It could be any kind of, like a Gary Yamamoto. I prefer KVD Ochos, but what I like to do is I normally will Texas rig them, and sometimes I'll use a bullet sinker depending on the situation. But basically how you're going to use this, you can watch one of my past videos on how to set it up, but the way that you're going to use this is you're going to throw this into medium to heavy cover. In a lot of cases you're going to let it flutter to the bottom, and you're going to wait for those strikes. You're going to do some nice finesse jerk and just work a small area, move on to the next area. Works really well. It's a good go-to. A lot of bass fishermen will fall back on this. So my number 2 is contested by many people. My number 2 is a spinnerbait. I prefer the Terminator line. I like the double willows with the pulse skirt. The reason I like spinnerbaits so much is they're so versatile. So you can cast them in 20 feet of water, or you can cast them in 1 foot of water. Depending on how fast you crank, you can kind of get them to skim just slightly below the surface. I like to work weed lines with them. A lot of times the bass, being a predator fish, the bass will sit just inside the weed line because they are waiting for the prey to come by to ambush it. So what I do is I use that to my advantage. I run along the weed lines with my spinner baits and wait for those fish to ambush. I can get into a little bit like a medium to heavy cover just by keeping my rod tip pointed at my lure. It reduces how much it snags and how much it bounces back. So if you want to get into medium or heavy cover, point your rod tip directly at the lure as you're cranking it in. But yeah, this is a great go-to. They're easy to repair too. Spinnerbaits tend not to last very long when you're catching large fish because they bend up or you rip the pulse skirts. Always buy extra pulse skirts. You can get them very inexpensive. It's just a great all-around universal lure. Now, my third go-to, which depending on the situations could be my first. I have a feeling a lot of bass fishermen will agree with me on this, that if you're in a situation where the bite is really tough, you're dealing with a multitude of different environments, rocks, reeds, grass, deeper water, so on. A really nice setup to cover some water and to kind of feel where the bite is chatterbait. Some people, I believe they call them blade baits, but chatterbait's what I call them. So the chatterbaits are really easy to use. They're inexpensive, and there's different setups you can use with them. Personally, I tend to use a crawfish style plastic on it. Right now, I've got Gary Yamamoto crawfish on there. Sometimes I'll cut them down if I'm missing strikes. You can cut the length of it down so that if you're getting a lot of misses, so that you'll get a better hook set. Now the way I use these is I like to use them in a little bit more of an open water situation, definitely like next to lilies or something like that, but I'm not in heavy cover with these. What I like to do is I like to cast them out, and when I reel it in, I like to reel it at a speed that I'm getting that vibration which the blade will give you, but at the same time I like to be just barely above the grass line or weed line that's underwater. I like to just kind of skim it. I like to pull those bass out of there. They like to ambush it. They come from the bottom up. It's just a great all-around, and and here's the thing is, they come in so many different colors, so many different blade styles. I can't say any are wrong or right. Personally, when I buy a chatterbait, if you look in the pictures I have here, you'll see a little closer. I don't like to get a multi-jointed blade. I like to get the blade that's connected directly to the jig with one single band coming off the top to hook into. What I have found by doing that, by getting that style, the chatter starts much faster, and that's the key. When you cast this out, you almost have to have your line tight almost right away and start reeling right away, because you want that blade to start chattering immediately. What I found is if you wait, you let it sink too long, or that chatter takes too long to start because of the jointed style blade, you just get less bites. The fish aren't as interested for some reason. So cast it out, immediately start reeling it in, but reel at a speed that lets you skim along the grass at the bottom of the water. It doesn't hurt to follow weed lines. Weed lines are always great, but that's the general. And they work real nice because you can kind of cast in a pattern to kind of get an idea where those fish are. And if you get some fish that are kind of finicky, once you pinpoint maybe where they could be, that's when you can switch back to that first one, that Senko style setup. So the next lure that I like to go to, my fourth, is a jerkbait. Jerkbaits are I like to use the phrase "good all around." These technically, in my opinion, aren't good all around, but they're good in a lot of situations. A lot of people, when they use a jerkbait, will just use them as a jerkbait. I'll use them as a crankbait sometimes in some cases, and it works. So basically, the way you use the jerkbait and how I use it is, I like to cast out. I like to be in that maybe 3 to 12 foot depth range. I like some cover. It doesn't need to be heavy. It can be rocks. It can be grass. It can be weeds. It can be any of the above. And what you do is you cast it out there, and what you're doing, you're trying to imitate like a dying fish, a fish that's in distress, like a bait fish. So what you want to do is you want to give it like jerks in different sequences or cadences, as some people call it. And I like to do mine at 1 to 3. So I'll go 1 with the rod, and then 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, like that. But the idea is, and the trick to making this work for you, is to make sure that as you're doing that, you're getting a full, quick stop on the bait. So as you give the bait a jerk, and you're jerking it like that, you don't want to do a slow release on the jerk. When you jerk it, you're giving it a quick tap like that, because what you want the bait to do is go like that and then stop, like that and then stop, or like that. And what it does is it makes the bait very erratic. And when the bait is erratic, that's what a dying bait fish basically does. It's an easy target for a predator such as a bass. And anytime you can make something easier for a predator fish to ambush, it makes it more appealing to them. So I like to use the jerk baits that have a rattle in them. I've just had better luck with them, is what it comes down to. The fifth bait that I like to use is a square bill. I like square bills. I like the movement of them. I've done very, very well with them all year. In any instances where you can drag a square bill without pulling up a bunch of weeds. So it is going to be situational, dependent on the water that you're fishing. But if you can get away with pulling a square bill through any area, I recommend it. Where they really shine though is in sandy, rocky areas, maybe even with some trees or branches. And you get it to drag. I like to get them down and get them to drag almost like that. And like this color here is a great color for spring. It's a reddish, blackish orange. It imitates like a crawfish style fish. This is fire in the spring. So now I've went over my five top setups, lures to use to catch more bass. As far as coloring goes on this, coloring is very situational, and it would apply to all 5 of these. You know, if you're depending on your clear water, in clear water, I like to use brighter colors, believe it or not, and in dark murky water, which a lot of people would assume you'd be using bright colors to kind of so they could see it. In dark murky water, I actually use very, very natural colors, and I do much better with it. And then obviously in the springtime, if you're like doing spawn or pre-spawn, I like whites and pinks. They do really well for kind of get those fish to go after them that aren't feeding very much. So as a bonus though, I'm going to throw in my 6 favorite lure. Now this is not like a catch more bass lure. This is a fun lure. It's my favorite lure if I just want to have fun and get those explosive hits. So everybody can agree that's used these is a frog, topwater frog. Personally, I like the popper style. I like that little cupped mouth, so I can get that splash if I choose to use it. You don't always have to use it though. That's why I like them to come with that, so you can always get that splash if you choose to use it. Topwater frogs are pretty situational. Open water, they do kind of okay, but I wouldn't necessarily use them in open water myself. I like to hit weed lines, but I also like to get deep into the lily pads or deep into the grass, because you can really work that really well with a frog because they're so weedless, they float on top. My tips and tricks for using a frog are going to, I personally, I like to get deep into the lily pads, grass, weeds such as that, and I like to get it on top of a lily pad or near some grass, and I spend some time in an area. Take your time. Don't be afraid to take your time with a frog. And you could let it sit for 10, 15, 20 seconds even. Give it a twitch. Not enough to move the frog a distance, but enough to move it and let it stay where it's at. Just a quick twitch like that. And when you do that, these little legs that come off these frogs, they'll spread out like this. And as they spread out, what I found is that's when I get a lot of my strikes. The other situation you can use it is drop it, pull it, and drop it on top of the lily pad. Twitch it a few times on the lily pad, pull it off onto the water. Many times I'll get that strike as it hits the water. It's just a great way to use a frog. It's a fun way to use a frog. So that kind of wraps up the different lures that I like to use when I want to catch more bass, which is all the time. I love catching as many as I can. So these are kind of my go-tos that I just showed you. A few things I didn't talk about. First of all, brands. What kind of brands do you buy? I mean, I told you about the spinnerbait. I like the Terminator brand. That's just been my go-to. As far as Senkos or soft plastics go, I always recommend getting a quality brand. That's what you want to go to, is a quality brand. I like the KVD Ochos. They've been just fantastic for me. Spinnerbaits, I like the Terminators. I've used them for years and years and years. I've caught just an abundant amount of fish with them, to the point where I bend them up and I keep buying more. I love them. The Chatterbait. I mean, if you want to get started, a good brand is Z-Man. Z-Man makes some less expensive ones. If you want to get into the higher end, there's the Jackhammer. The Jackhammer tends to be real popular, but they run $17, $18 on average, so a lot of guys don't want to spend that much. Pick up some Z-Man Chatterbaits. They'll work fine for you. Squarebills. Squarebills, once again, not a specific brand I use. Just make sure you buy a quality brand. Don't buy generic brands. They don't do as well. There's very little research and development put into them, and they use lesser quality plastics and hooks and so on. So get a quality brand. And as far as the frogs go, that is also a thing. It comes down to the quality. Buy quality brands. Lately, I've been using a lot of Spro. I like the Spro. They've done well, in my opinion, recently. So that's my opinion and my tips on what brands to buy. Thanks for watching. I hope you learned something from this. I know that if you use these lures, you're going to catch more bass if you're not already using them. Now, if you have any questions, once again, let me know. Ask in the comments. I will get back to you. You can also check us out on our Facebook, Fishing Fever, and on Instagram, Fishing Fever 6464. Don't forget to check out my other videos, and don't forget, one more cast.